Hey, everybody, what's up? Welcome to a playoff edition of the Chop Shop. Trey Wingo here with my longtime work wife for all those many years, Mark Schlereth. Stinky, we made it. The postseason is just about here. I'm excited. It's going to be a weird one because obviously one coach is going to not be able to coach his team Sunday night because of COVID, but we're here and the journey begins.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I thought about this. It just popped into my head. So you know how deep I think. It's the three Fs of Super Wild Card Weekend, right? It's going to be
super wild card.
Yes, it's going to be food, football, and lots of farting. And that's what I'm really looking forward to. So make sure you wear stretchy pants this weekend because that, to me, is the key. 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. The fridge is just right down the hallway there. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, there's not going to be a lot of mobility
No.
once we get started here with the playoffs. Couple of things to think about as we get set. History suggests that one of the 6 seeds is going to pull off the upset. That would be the Browns or the Rams. In 6 of the last 7 postseasons, at least one 6 seed has gone on to win. And if been there, done that means anything, playoff experience, the Chiefs are way ahead here. They have a combined 202 playoff games played on their roster. That's the most by far. The least, as you might expect, the Cleveland Browns with 43. And we're sort of in a weird scenario here, Stink, because we have 7 teams that are in the playoffs that have won at least 12 games. That ties 3 other seasons for the most in playoff history. Last season, 2019, 2011, and 2003. And all 6 AFC wildcard teams won at least 11 games. All 7 AFC playoff teams won at least 11 games. That's only happened one other time since the AFL-NFL merger of 1970, and that was back in 1980 when 5 AFC teams had at least 11, and there were only 5 teams that made the postseason. So for that to happen, I think in a year where we have 7 playoff teams speaks to the depth of the AFC as opposed to the NFC.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And when you start looking at all the records, all these 11-5 records, I mean, in 1989, I was playing for the Washington football team. We weren't called that at the time, but the Washington football team.
Correct.
We went 10-6. That was my rookie year and didn't make the playoffs. And It's very rare that you go 10-6 and not make the playoffs. This year in the AFC, 10-6 is just not good enough to get in. I mean, pretty amazing when you talk about depth and the fact that 3 North teams are in, with Pittsburgh being in, Baltimore being in, and Cleveland being in. So a lot of depth there, a lot of really good football, which that's what's exciting about this. And the 7th, I thought that initially, Trey, it's like when they moved the extra point back, I was like, I don't know, it seems hokey to me, right? And then you're like, there's some missed extra points, and you're like, this is actually interesting. The 7th game in the playoffs, having 7 teams instead of 6, I was like, oh, come on, guys, too many. And I'm like, this is kind of cool that they've done that. So good on the NFL. I call them out enough. I need to praise them when they do something that actually works.
Listen, I've said this before and I'll say it again. The moving back at the PAT is the single greatest rule change in the history of the NFL because it put some chance into what was an automatic play, and it's made game strategy when those things are missed so much more interesting. All right, so let's start with the first game on Saturday, which is really, honestly, I think it's America's team right now, Stink. It's the Buffalo Bills, their first home playoff game since 1995, taking on an Indianapolis Colts team, which I think might be giving them a lot of trouble with the way they can run the ball.
Yeah, see, here's the thing that's interesting to me. I mean, obviously what Indy was able to do over the course, they've kind of flown under the radar. Phillip Rivers played great on a 1-year deal. You're right about the Bills, though. And I think part of the reason they're America's team is because everybody's afraid of the Bills Mafia, their fans.
They're not. We talk about table dancing. They're table breakers. Okay.
Yeah.
And listen, they cover themselves with mustard and ketchup. So yeah, they're legit terrifying.
Yeah, and there's not enough tables. I mean, think about this. You can go to any Walmart in the general Buffalo area, Walmart, Target, whatever the case may be. There are none of them picnic tables, them foldable.
Nope.
They're gone. Yeah, everybody's waiting to break them. Here's the thing I love about the Bills. I was talking to Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator of the Bills. He said, listen, this is what I believe is good football. When you can throw it on 3rd down, when everybody in the building knows you're going to throw it, including the other team, when you can run it in critical situations, when you're in short yardage and you can convert, when you're down on the red zone and you can run, or like at the end of the Pittsburgh game, when they had 7 straight runs to eat up 5 or 6 minutes at the end of the game on the clock, that's when you know you're good. There is only one area of the Bills that I think are deficient. And that's a legitimate, we used to call it a war daddy. When I was
Yep.
playing, we would just say, hey, man, this team don't have no war daddy. We're fine. And what a war daddy was an Aaron Donald, back in my day, it was a John Randall, a Lawrence Taylor, a Warren Sapp,
Reggie White.
Richie White, like one dude where you're like, if we don't have that guy double or triple teamed, we're in deep trouble. When you can go 5 1-on-1s across the board and feel pretty good about picking all that up, and especially with Indianapolis because they're good up front, when you can do that, you've got a chance to support your quarterback and be in any football game. That's the only real weakness to me that the Buffalo Bills have. They don't have one like truly legitimate pass rushing threat. Now, White at the cornerback, one advantage, he can lock down anybody. You can roll coverage to the opposite side. They do a lot of that. They're really good on all 3 levels, but that one big time pass rusher is the only deficiency I see in the Bills team.
Well, technically, if they did have a war daddy, it would probably be their quarterback with the way he's played, Josh Allen. And look, he has been phenomenal this year. They're playing a top 10 defense in the Colts, but this season against top 10 defenses, Allen and the Bills are 4-0, completing 70% of his throws and only 11 touchdowns versus only 3 interceptions. But I don't know if it's fair or unfair, Stink, but the thing that I still have in the back of my mind when it comes to Josh Allen in the postseason is the absolute meltdown of him in the second half against the Houston Texans last season. Look, he was great in the first half, and then he just sort of lost it in the second half. And you could literally see the game slipping away from him. Now, I think he has a lot more confidence going into this postseason, obviously, but there is something to the idea, okay, I saw what you did a year ago. Show me you're not that guy, and the moment's not going to get to you the same way it did a year ago. Is that fair or unfair?
No, I think it's fair, but I do think there's an evolution. You're allowed to get better in this league.
Correct.
And he has grown exponentially. The other thing is Stephon Diggs. And when I talked to Josh Allen just about his progression, he talked about Stephon Diggs and he's talked about the connection. It goes back to almost like when you and I were coming up, when we were growing up, early 80s football, late 70s, where it was just, hey, man, go get open. We're just going to play. And so with Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen told me, like any other quarterback would probably be really frustrated because Stephon is never where he's supposed to be. He's like, if the route is supposed to be run at 11 yards, he may be 14 or he may be 8. But the thing is he's always freaking open. And so they have this connection where he said, hey, just do whatever you're going to do. And I got enough arm talent to get you the ball. And so there's this almost this aspect of it's a scripted play, but it's run unscripted. You know what I'm saying? So there's a level of fluidity to all the things that they do outside with Stephon Diggs, inside with the all of a sudden I lost his name. The inside receiver. Yeah, Cole Beasley. Thank you.
Who, by the way, is still questionable for this game. So,
right.
And those easy completions over the last couple of years that have really helped keep that offense, to use your phrase, in rhythm and on time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a big deal, but they've had a lot of different guys. Gabriel has been awesome as a rookie. So they've got some talent there. And I'll tell you, he has just matured. He understands the game, and they have done this in such a way where they started with all the things that he could do, running the ball and all the different quarterback designed runs. And they have just continued to evolve that offense to the point where he is so dialed in. He knows exactly what he wants. And he and his offensive play caller, Brian Dable, are so connected. I mean, there's a real good relationship there.
To your point, just to show how important and invaluable the pickup of Diggs was in that trade. This season in the NFL, number 1 in targets, Stephon Diggs with 166. Number 1 in receptions, Stephon Diggs with 127. Number 1 in receiving yards, Stephon Diggs with 1,535 yards. That's how important he's been to that offense. Okay, so then there's the Colts. And Phillip Rivers just coming into that team this season for the first time. But how much is the emergence of Jonathan Taylor, the running back, the rookie out of Wisconsin down the stretch? How much has that meant, and how much do you believe that's important if the Colts want to try and play keep away from what we just talked
Right.
about, that incredible Buffalo Bills offense with Diggs and with Allen and with Beasley and everybody else. How important is it for them to pound the rock and play keep away? Because they can do that against that Bills defense.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. The other thing is it sets up that play action stuff for Phillip Rivers, where he can get easy conversions. Like third
Yeah.
down, like when you can be in third down and 4 minus. I was doing a game against with Green Bay and Detroit, and the offensive or defensive coordinator Corey Unlin of Detroit said, "Hey, listen, if you give Aaron Rodgers 6 yards on first down, you might as well just give him another first down. If it's second down and 4, you might as well just say, hey, make it first down again. Let's start over and see if we can stop you this time."
Right.
That's what they have going on in Indianapolis as well. When you're in third down and short situations, when you can be in those situations and you have the duality of both running the football, throwing the football, having those short conversions, you become very tough. And I'll go back over the last 2 years, not this year, not included, but the last 2 years, the Chiefs had lost 8 games total. Every game that they lost, there was a common factor. It was first downs and it was possessing the ball. Almost every game that they lost, the time of possession was like 40-20 in favor of the opponent. And here's the kicker. They still scored on average 29 points. The Chiefs did, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
I mean, with the Buffalo Bills, I mean, they've scored 140 some odd points in the last 3 games. You have got to
142.
keep that. Yeah, you've got to keep that offense off the football field. I think that's a huge factor. The other thing it does for you is it keeps your defense fresh, and that defense is outstanding. They have had a couple of games where they have got run, but for the most part, that defense has been great. That complementary nature of football becomes very apparent. If they can do that, if they can possess the ball, they can run it out, they can keep that offense at bay, then they've got a great chance to win this game.
I mean, just over the last 8 weeks of the season, they've averaged just over 147 yards on the ground. A big part of that is Jonathan Taylor. And just so
Mhm.
people understand what he's been able to do from a rookie perspective, he joins Hall of Famer Edgerrin James and Hall of Famer Marshall Faulk as the only rookies in Colts history with 1,000 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns in a season. So to me, that's the recipe for success, right? Because I think we can all agree that Phillip Rivers, who I think is going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback at someday, isn't the same Phillip Rivers he was in the height of those days with the Chargers, where they were in San
Sure.
Diego and they were throwing it all over the field with all the receivers he had and obviously Antonio Gates. So you don't want to rely on him, especially in a place where it's going to be cold in Buffalo. And they're going to have, I think, like 7,000 people now in the stands. So is Taylor, in your opinion, the key to them coming away with a win?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. Him, ball control, running the football. Like I said, being in those manageable second down and medium, third down and short situations where you as a defense just can't pin your ears back. You've got to play. You've got to play both run and pass. When you have that kind of, like I said, duality, man, it just makes offense so much easier. So I think that is obviously the biggest key for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, his 741 rushing yards since week 11 are behind only Derrick Henry. By the way, I think that should be a separate category because Derrick Henry will be here for everything. And if you're second behind Derrick Henry, it's almost good as being first because of the way Derrick Henry has had this season play out. All right, all that being said and done, who do you like in the game?
I like the Bills. They are
Yeah.
so hot right now. And like I said, I think they're a pretty complete team, minus the one big time pass rusher. But they still have, don't get me wrong, they still have a good defensive line. They've got a great rotation on their defensive line. So they keep those guys fresh. I still like them as one of, if not the best team in this whole playoffs.
Yeah, I think I have to go with Buffalo here too. You never want to go chalk, but it just seems like, I mean, the video of and I know this sounds stupid. The video of them at practice early this week, jumping around to hammer, and I think they're feeling themselves, for lack of a better term, much in the same way Kansas City went into last postseason, feeling themselves. I think Buffalo is feeling themselves right now. They know who they are and they know what they're capable of. And I think 7,000 is going to feel like 30 or 40,000 inside that stadium in Buffalo. They've been waiting this game for so long. I like the Bills in that one as well. All right, second game on Saturday is a divisional rival in the postseason game, which is always tough. You have the Rams as a 6th seed taking on the 3rd-seeded Seahawks. This all depends on whether or not Jared Goff is able to play, right? I mean, Sean McVay is holding this as close to the vest as possible. I have no idea if Goff is going to see the field, but I just don't see a way for the Rams to pull the upset if it's John Wolford against Russell Wilson. as opposing quarterbacks.
I'm 100% with you. And like Jared Goff, I mean, how good are you going to be with that thumb coming off that surgery? Um, one thing about if you pressure him, if you change coverages, if you give different between pre-snap and post-snap looks, Jared Goff sometimes has some troubles with those things. I just think it's a really tough ask for him to come off that thumb injury and be especially when you have to drive the ball. I mean, like there's
Yeah.
one thing about throwing swing passes and doing those things. It's the deep, dig routes. It's the deep overs. It's the things that you have to get behind and really drive the football that would scare me a little bit with that thumb injury. And Wolford, that was a great kept secret because he came out and threw a couple of balls early in that game against Arizona. I was like, ugh. And then he
Yep.
started running. I was like, oh, like he's a still
Yeah.
scrambling Jesse, that kid. So Arizona never really adjusted. He made only a few good throws within that game, but he was scrambling around, converting third downs, doing those things. He's not going to sneak up on the Seahawks. It's not going to be
Nope.
one of them sneak up things like he did against Arizona. And then, of course, Arizona lost Kyler Murray, and that was it for them. I will tell you this about the other thing about the Seahawks. They had a historically bad defense through the first, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 weeks of the season.
Yeah, it totally changed. I mean, they were a much better defense down the stretch of the regular season.
The interesting thing was even early, and I did the first game of the season between them and the Rams, even early, Trey, I watched their defense on tape, and I did several Seattle games. I was like, this defense, they're actually really good. They're just giving up a lot of late yards. They have a lot of big leads where they just let the teams get back in because they're just playing a form of prevent. The numbers don't tell you exactly what they are. I tell you, Brooks, the rookie linebacker, came in. He's coming off an injury out of college. It took him a while to play. They started playing him, and Seattle will play a lot of base to nickel and do those things. By the end of the season, man, he looked like Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright. He was playing great. The Carlos Dunlop trade really changed the way they rushed the passer. It really freed up guys like Jaron Reed, and I tell you, they're a lot better. And then with a healthy with a healthy Jamal Adams, I mean, they are a freak show on defense. So they're not exactly what the statistics would say they are. I think they're a much better defense than they've been given credit for. I just think this is a tall task for the Rams with a quarterback coming off injury.
Yeah, and then you have Andrew Whitworth coming off injury for the Rams. Hopefully, he's going to be able to play on Saturday. But you talk about statistics, the statistics for the Rams defense. It is incredible how quickly things change, right? 2 years ago, it was all about the Rams offense that got them to Super Bowl Sunday. Well,
Right.
whatever the Rams are going to do this year in the postseason is about the defense and nothing else. Number one total defense, number one scoring defense, number one passing defense. They're going to have to be at their absolute best to give the Rams a chance to win this game.
Right.
And one of the things we saw from the two, and you probably saw it in the game that you saw called between these two the first time, is the Jalen Ramsey effect on DK Metcalf. I think in the two games he's covered him 53 of 77 plays, and he has just one reception, DK does, for 6 yards against other people that are covering him. I think he has 7 catches for over 70 yards. How critical is that matchup alone, Stink, to give the Rams a chance in this game?
It's huge. There's no question about that. And DK is an absolute freak show. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey is one of the best in the business. There is no question. And I guarantee you, DK will take it as a personal challenge. He'll look at it and say, "Hey, man, this is," as will Jalen Ramsey. It's one of those great matchups that oftentimes probably don't get. There's not enough made of those things. But anytime you're doing that, it means that other guys have an opportunity. And with Seattle, who are those other guys that end up taking advantage of those opportunities? At Disley at the tight end position. Disley's a crazy guy because Disley is, he's just one of those guys that doesn't look real fast, that doesn't look real dynamic, that just is a great football player.
Yeah.
Hollister has come around as well. Obviously, in Tyler Lockett. I tell you the one place that when I watch the Rams scares me a little bit is they are so locked in to the coverage aspect and rushing the quarterback, Trey, that if you use their rushing skills against them, what I would call swing gate, where you're inviting guys half the field, up the field, and you're kind of using the trap game, the inside run game, I've seen them give up explosive gash plays in those scenarios. So that would be one thing that I would try to take advantage of if I was the Hawks in the running game, to slow down that pass rush a little bit and see if I can use their athleticism and their penetration ability, because there's nobody better in the NFL than Aaron Donald at exploding off the ball and getting into your backfield 3 or 4 yards deep. So that's something to look for in the run game for the Seattle Seahawks. Can they take advantage of that penetration that the Rams will most certainly have?
Okay, so push comes to shove. What would it take? I think we're both taking the Seahawks in this game, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so give me the freak show statistical anomaly thing that has to happen for the Rams to walk out of there with either Walford or a very limited Jared Goff at quarterback to find a way to win. Are we talking about 3 fluke turnovers, a special teams play? Are the Rams going to empty the bucket here in terms of what they're doing, play calling on defense and special teams?
Yeah, I think it's going to take. I think it's going to take a couple things. I think it's going to take a great rushing performance. And that includes at least 3 conversions, or excuse me, 5 conversions on 3rd down from their quarterback, Wolford. Like, it's going to take a really good 100-yard, 120-yard rushing performance, from their backfield. But it's going to take probably 5 conversions on 3rd down just with their quarterback's legs to keep a couple of drives alive. Obviously, they're going to have to play out of control, getting after Russell Wilson, maybe 5 to 7 sacks, that type of performance. If they can do that, I think they have a chance. But I think, like you said, both of us are going to go Hawks.
Yeah, I think that's the only logical way to look at this. So we'll see what happens. And then the nightcap on Saturday is the Washington football team, one of your old squads, hosting the Tampa Bay Bucks and Tom Brady. And you had a couple of Brady games down the stretch of the season. He's playing out of his mind. I put this out there on Twitter. I want to make sure I get this accurate, how well he's playing so far down the stretch. Tom Brady, over the last 4 games, obviously the Bucks were 4-0. He's had 1,333 passing yards, 12 passing touchdowns, and a 126.9 passer rating in those games. And look, I get it. Passer rating is a flawed stat. 158.3 or 158.8, whatever it is, should never be what is best. But the point being, those numbers for Tom Brady down the stretch of the season, he's never played. Those are career best numbers for Tom Brady over the last 4 games of a regular season in his incredible 20-year plus seasons playing in the NFL. How good are they right now?
They are outstanding. And they have really come together on the offensive side. It's interesting. When I did their week 2 game, and Bruce Arians told me, hey, we're just kind of dating right now. And I asked him kind of where they were, and he said, hey man, we're just dating. We haven't sealed the deal yet, but we're kind of dating and messing around. And I asked Tom Brady the same question. He goes, we're sliding into second right now, but we got a long way to go, before we seal the marriage, so to speak. So, the interesting thing is the 2 different philosophical approaches to football. So Tom Brady, over the course of his career, always wanted pre-snap indicators, meaning I want to get into formation. So, something I would call a West formation out of 12 personnel. So 2 tight ends on the end of the line of scrimmage. So it'd be like West right slot and a slot on the other side. And so when you get into that, first off, you have base personnel, right? So you're getting 3 linebackers when you have that personnel. So you have 2 corners on the field in that personnel. Well, what does it tell you? If the corners go over, it's automatic man. If one corner stays on the 2 tight end side, you got zone. That's a pre-snap indicator, right? And it's pretty much 100%. So teams get into that just to give a pre-snap kind of indicator. And then there's motions and who follows the motions. And there's a lot of different ways that you can get these pre-snap indicators. So Bruce Arians talked about the fact that Tom has always been a pre-snap indicator guy. And Bruce is like, I've always been a post-snap. I want to know, I want to get in more static formations, make the defense declare post-snap as opposed to pre-snap. And it's something that they had to work through. And over the last 6 weeks or so, they've really found their groove as play caller, and obviously Byron Leftwich works into that as play caller, but as designer of the plays and play caller and head coach, and Tom Brady, they've really gotten on the same page that way. And they have been astronomical. You mentioned those numbers at 1,330 yards, 12 TDs, and a 126.9. Remember, he got taken out at halftime of that Detroit game I called, where he had
That's
4
exactly
TDs,
right.
right? About 400 yards at half. He'd had another 4 TDs and 800 more yards to add to that. Had he been, or another 400 more yards to add to that had he stayed in that Detroit game.
All right. So you're going to call me crazy, but I think I give Washington a puncher's chance in this game. A pretty decent puncher's chance, actually. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
That front seven for Washington is ferocious. There's no question about it. Chase Young, now look, be careful what you wish for because you just may get it. He said, I want Tom Brady. Well, you're going to get him, and you're going to get peak Tom Brady. But that Washington defense, Stink, is no joke. And again, passer rating is a ridiculous number because it's hard to translate into how you get to that number, right?
Uh-huh.
But the Washington football team has one of the best defenses against passer rating in the NFL. And this year, Tom Brady against top 10 teams in terms of their defense passer rating, he's 0-4. Now, look, they're going to have to score some points, and they're going to have to find a way with either Alex Smith or Taylor Heineke to find a way to get that done. But I think this game is going to be closer than a lot of people are expecting it to be.
It's interesting that you say that because you look at their D line with Young and Allen and it's Sweat and heck, even the fifth guy off the Kerrigan is a first rounder, right? Like,
correct.
They've got nothing but first round guys. They are exceptionally talented. I'll give you all that. There is no question about it. There's been a lot of talk about Chase Young being the defensive rookie of the year, right? And he finished the season with 6.5 sacks. And I will tell you, he's in the playoffs and good for him, and he's an outstanding player. But just an aside, Jeremy Chin for the Carolina Panthers.
Thank you. Out of SIU Carbondale.
Yes, should be the defensive rookie of the year. That guy played. Now get this. Wait, he played Will. He played Sam, linebacker. He played rush D end. He played nickel corner. He played outside corner. He played free safety, strong safety. Do you know this? So you normally have a position group, Trey. And after your team meeting, you go in with your position group and you meet with that position group and you have a couple hours and you put in game plans and everything else. Do you know that this kid doesn't have a position group? He meets individually with Al Holcomb and they go over the whole defensive strategy, what's going on, how they're going to do it, all the different positions he plays. The kid has had like 121 tackles. He's a phenom. He is a phenom. And to me, by far, he probably won't win the award because he played in Carolina and he's not getting the love and they didn't go to the playoffs and all that stuff. But what he was able to accomplish in all the different positions he played, I think it's just absolutely amazing. Now, back to our game really quick. And this is why I'll give you credit on this about Washington football team having a chance.
And I will take it.
Okay. When you look at Tampa Bay, man, they are so much feast or famine to these guys. And it's essentially the way they're designed. Like Bruce Arians' whole thing is, hey, man, I want no risk it, no biscuit. We want to push it down the field. We're going to take our chances, right? And on the defensive side, Todd Bowles fits perfectly with that because Todd Bowles is probably number 2 in the National Football League as far as blitz. But I think he's the number 1 guy blitzing on first and second down, almost stealing a possession, stealing a down, right? Getting you behind the chains early, trying to get his offense more opportunities. One thing about them, and I've done, I think, 3 or 4 Tampa games this year, they will give up big plays because of their aggressiveness. It's just the nature of it, man. When you're bringing pressure, if you block it up, you're getting one-on-ones, and I don't care who you are. Nobody can cover in this league for 3.5 seconds plus. It can't be done. So if you don't get home on those pressures, you can give up big plays. And Tampa Bay has done that. They've proven that time and time again. So they are kind of a feast or famine football team. Now, I think they'll do enough from a big play standpoint, and that's what they do. How many turnovers can we create? How many, second down and 13s or 14s can we create? How many sacks can we get? Like, that's what they rely on. And I think they'll make that happen. I think they win this game, but because the feast or famine nature, and because Bruce Arians, he doesn't want to run it. He wants to run it. He wants to run it well enough to set up play action so he can go deep. Like he doesn't truly want to run the ball, truly want to control line of scrimmage. That's not. I mean, Bruce and I have these go arounds all the time. That's not really what he wants to do. His whole thing is, hey, we'll run 22 duo 15 times and we'll set up a couple play actions off of that. That's good enough for me. That's where he is.
Yeah. A couple of things to keep your eye on statistically in this game. Gronk has 12 receiving touchdowns in the postseason. If he catches a touchdown pass, presumably from Brady, he and Brady would have the most touchdown passes thrown and caught by a duo in playoff history. And I know they're under 500. I get all of that. But the last two times, the only two times we've had a playoff team under 500 in the postseason, both times that team has won. The Beastquake game was 10 years ago today. 7-9 Seattle beat the defending Super Bowl champions, the Saints, in that game. And either 2013 or 2014, I can't remember, the Panthers were 7-8-1, and they won the NFC South. Granted, that game was against a Carson Palmer-less Arizona Cardinal team as he was injured down the stretch, but they found a way to win. So the only two times we've had a losing team make the postseason as a division winner, they both won the game. So don't tell me it can't happen. I've seen it happen twice, but I think we're both picking Tampa Bay here, right?
So you're telling me there's a chance.
There's a chance.
Yes.
That's exactly right. But we're both picking.
Yes.
We're both picking the Bucs. I just think it's going to be closer, and I give Washington a puncher's chance. And obviously the story of Alex Smith would be phenomenal if that was the case. Okay, now we flip to the Sunday slate. It's a rematch of last year's playoff game where Derrick Henry went in there and torched Baltimore. This time it's at Tennessee. The Ravens taking on the Titans. Both of them are 11-5. Ravens are the 5 seed. Tennessee is the 4. But Stink, I looked this up and I was shocked to see this. And we'll get to the other side of this a little bit later. You know, everyone talked about how much balance the Ravens had last year in Lamar Jackson's MVP season. They were the only team ever to average 200 yards rushing and 200 yards passing in a season. That no team had ever done that before. My reaction was, well, that's great, but they only averaged about 237 passing yards a game. That's not really good in today's NFL. Worked with too many mics over the years. Steak, nobody threw for fewer yards per game this year. Nobody than the Ravens. They were dead last. The Jets threw for more yards per game than the Baltimore Ravens. I'm sorry. That's problematic for me in the way this team is constructed. And we've seen the last 2 years, the Ravens hosted a wild card game against the Chargers, and the Chargers with that front seven ran them out, and Lamar was, loose with the football. And I know he accounted for like 500 yards of offense last year in the loss to the Titans, but a lot of that was when that game was out of reach. I think there are still legitimate concerns with how the Ravens offense is constructed as to whether or not it's going to be successful in the postseason.
Totally agree. And here's the thing that I've seen as I've studied the Ravens. So when the Ravens have their running game going, and it's unique because it's truly 11 on 11 football. Normally a quarterback hands it off and he just watches, right? And it's 10 on 11. It's unique in that it's 11 on 11 because he's going to run the ball and he's going to run the ball a bunch. The other thing that's unique about their running game is the way they get numbers through motions and through quick motions with wide receivers, fullbacks out of the backfield, running backs out of the backfield. They'll line up in a very balanced formation, Trey, where you have to split the field in half because you want to be balanced as a defense. So you essentially have a single high safety and you have 5 guys on one side and you have 5 guys on the other side and a single high safety. And all of a sudden at the snap of the ball, instead of being, a 5-on-5 matchup, all of a sudden you'll have movement and you'll have 7-on-5 guys on that side of the football. And the running back or the quarterback running it as a running back. And so they've got these unique ways to get advantages in the running game. And they do an exceptional job of that. And here's the thing that I have noticed. When they're running it that way, when they have the ability and they're constantly in short yardage situations, 2nd down and 2s, then all of a sudden you have to play them in a form of man, or you have to play them in press. You have somewhere, it doesn't matter if you're in a zone coverage, there are always man principles in a zone coverage. So if you're in quarters, you're outside corners, if you're running vertical routes, you're going to get, if you're running inside vertical and outside vertical, you're going to get man-to-man coverage out there. There are going to be man concepts in all the zone coverages. And what ends up happening is teams get down and press, and Lamar is exceptional at finding the one-on-one matchups and throwing an accurate ball. Where he really struggles is when you stop the running game and you can play zone coverage, legit zone coverage, and you can create layered throws where he has to be accurate, like over a linebacker, in front of a safety, over a safety, in front of a corner type of thing. That's where he really struggles. And so, it sounds cliche, but if you can stop their running game and have the ability to be in third down and long and play zone, that's when you turn him over. That's when he really is not. He is not I don't want to say legitimate, but he is not an upper level type of quarterback. And that's where he struggles. So listen, man, he's got a lot to prove. He's got to prove that he can win a game when they don't have both the running game and that one-on-one passing game going on because of man coverage stuff. So he's got to be able to prove that. And the thing is Tennessee's defense is, they've given up huge points.
That's the point, right? Look, everything you're saying is accurate, but the Ravens just set another franchise record for most rushing yards by a team. They're the number one rushing attack, and the Titans, I think, they're 29th, 19th against the rush. But if this isn't the game, I want to be clear when I say the way the offense is constructed, it's not just Lamar. Hollywood Brown has not lived up to what they thought he would have been when they used a first-round pick on him a year ago. They don't have a bunch of dynamic playmakers in the passing game. They do not.
True.
But if you're not going to do it against this Tennessee defense, the question is, when are you going to do it? Because this isn't the same Titans defense that did those things that you're talking about, Mark, a year ago in the playoffs. They are a different unit. They are not great. So I think there's a lot of pressure on that Ravens passing game. And I want to say it that way for a reason. It's on the Ravens passing game to find a way to make plays, because I'm telling you, Derrick Henry's going to get his in this game. That is a guarantee. That much we know.
Well, I will say this. So last week, I'm calling Saints at Carolina. And the game before that I'm breaking down is Tennessee, Carolina. They have played each other. And so I make these videos for my crew, right? For my production crew. And I'm saying, hey, Drew Brees really driving the ball in this kind of dig hole, 18 yards down the seam to the tight ends that if you run your number 2 receiver in the middle of the field, you run him off, you run coverage off, and you run a dig underneath, about an 18-yard in-cutting route underneath. Like that hole, especially on the right side, in a 3-by-1 formation, that's a hole that Drew Brees he just exploits. He'll throw it there 7-8 times a game. He'll get 6 completions, and it'll be for 18 yards of crap, whatever 6 times 18 is. I'm not a math major, Trey. You know that about me. So
can confirm.
Yes. So anyhow, that hole, that exposure. But I'm watching Tennessee, and I made 4 videos on Roger Saffold and number 64 Davis for the Tennessee Titans, because they are so damn good. Like everybody talks about King Henry, those two are absolutely, they are landlords. They are controlling the space between tackles and centers on both sides. They are absolutely destroying people. And I make all these videos. I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm not covering Tennessee this weekend. I'm covering Carolina. But I got so excited about it. It was like the kind of stuff you close the study door and put a tie on the doorknob and tell your significant other, don't come in here. I'm watching Tennessee film right now. So
yeah, that's what the tie on the door means. You're watching game film,
right?
Yeah. Speaking of, just so you know how well, when I say Derrick Henry's getting his minimum 5 games NFL history, most rushing yards per game, Henry's averaging 126 per playoff game. Do you know the only player that's done better than him in NFL postseason history?
Yeah, Terrell Davis.
That would be 100% correct. Hey, who blocked for him?
Yeah, yours truly.
There you go. TD averaged 142.5, which is That's an absurd number. And people are like, whoa, he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. His career was short. I'm like, shut up. If you average 142 yards rushing per game for your playoff career, you're a Hall of Fame running back. And I'm glad we settled that one a few years ago. Okay, who do you like in this game?
I am going to put my QB bias aside, and say that this is the game that Lamar Jackson gets over the top, gets his first playoff win. And I'm kind of hoping for him. I mean, he's been such an exceptional player, and he's such a good kid, man. I just want to see him have some playoff success, so people can't say, yeah, but he hasn't won a playoff game.
Correct.
I think Baltimore is a little bit more complete team. So I'm gonna go with the Baltimore Ravens, but trust me, if Tennessee wins, I won't be surprised at all.
Right. It would not surprise me if Tennessee won this one as well. But to your point, at some point, Lamar Jackson and this Ravens team are winning a playoff game. And you know where I stand on wins. It's not a quarterback stat. It's going to take the entire team to get it done. I think the Ravens with Lamar as their starting quarterback, if they don't do it against this Titans defense, it will be fair to ask, when will this offense, as it's constructed, ever do it? For that reason, I am going with the Baltimore Ravens as well. And now we get to a very interesting game. The Chicago Bears sort of backed into the postseason. They could have won and got in if they'd taken care of Green Bay. They didn't, but a couple of other things fell their way, and they get into the postseason, and they take on the New Orleans Saints. I think we can all agree that Drew Brees is not the Drew Brees that we've seen for a while, and that we know, Mark, that this Bears defense has been good. But what's changed and kept their playoff hopes alive and gotten them into the postseason has been a completely different looking Mitchell Trubisky. This game I find fascinating because of the limitations we've seen on Brees. And yes, Mike Thomas may be available, but we don't know how Mike Thomas like he's going to be. With that defense, I give them a puncher's chance in this game, the Bears.
Yeah, the Bears defensively, you're right. I don't trust Mitchell Trubisky. I don't think anybody probably should. But with that said, you're right. He's had a complete turnaround, which is really cool. I mean, that part
been a
is
different dude down the stretch.
Right.
Been a different dude.
That part, and I talked to Sean Payton last week because I did their game. The first half of that Kansas City game, Drew didn't look very good. The second half, he actually played pretty well. Then the last game of the season, or last 2 games of the season, yeah, he threw the ball pretty well. As a matter of fact, going into the Carolina game, Sean Payton told me he probably threw it as well as he's thrown in the last couple of years in practice. Just really, that time off healing the ribs actually helped his arm and helped his, just helped his body in general. So I think Drew is okay. He's throwing it better than I think a lot of people give him credit for. But you're right, he's not where he once was. Obviously, I just think the Saints are I think they're so talented. And I'll tell you one thing. You and I talked about this. That game where their defense bowled out of control against Kansas City and still gave up 32 points. That was a huge kind of shot in the arm to the Saints on how good they actually are. Because that first half was exceptional, the way they played in that first half. They were one of the top run defense teams in all of football. They had a couple of weeks where they really sloughed off. But I just think they're exceptionally talented defensively. They've got difference makers at all three levels. Linebacker Demario Davis is phenomenal. Cam Jordan is great. Trey Hendrickson has 13 and a half sacks. David Onyemata is a great young player. And then their back end, with Lattimore and what Jenkins is doing. They just have a great back end. And I love their defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen. I think he does a great job with that defense. They're just really tied together right now on the defensive side. And I think that will be enough. It's a big spread, but I think that'll be enough for them to get a victory over this Bears team.
Yeah, look, I understand what you're saying about Trubisky, and they played Houston, Minnesota, and Jacksonville, and they scored over 30 points 3 games in a row for the first time since George Halas and Gale Sayers were playing and coaching for the Chicago Bears. I mean, that's how long it had been. Then, of course, they were limited in the loss to the Green Bay Packers. And I think this defense is going to give Mitchell a lot of problems. But I do think they have to get some turnovers on defense, right? Because this defense of the Saints, as you just mentioned, is legit across the board. Top 5 in total defense scoring and rushing and passing. They're top 4, they're 4th or 5th in all of those categories. For me, when I say puncher's chance, Trubisky's going to have to play the game of his life, and Khalil Mack's going to have to do Khalil Mack things, right? That's the way. And Roquan Smith, those two guys are going to have to wreak havoc on an offensive line for the New Orleans Saints that has been pretty solid throughout this entire season.
Yeah, and I tell you the other thing they do a really good job of, and I don't think Sean Payton gets credit for this. He loves to run the football. I mean, he runs the snot out of the football.
And it looks like Kamara is going to be there. It looks like Kamara is going to be able to play.
Yeah, I didn't think he'd be available, but it looks like he'll be there. They love to run the football. They're really good in that. It was funny. Matt Rule told me something I never heard before, and I wrote it down, and I was like, that's really good. And because I've always believed you have to have an identity, especially in the running game. And he said, when every week you have to scheme up your running game, you're not good.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And he goes, that's where we are right now. Every week we have to say, hey, they're not very good at this. Let's make that our running game this week. So when they take that away, then what are you left to do? I don't know. What am I going to do? Right? So the thing about the New Orleans Saints is come hell or high water, they're going to run their outside zone.
Yep.
And they're going to run it into the boundary, and they're going to beat the living piss out of you doing it. And then they're going to have their scheme runs, but their scheme runs are going to be based on what you don't do well as a defense. But they are going to have their main stable of runs, and they're going to execute the snot out of those. And they do it from a formational standpoint. You watch them, just the different formations, different personnel groupings they use, and they're unique in that a guy like Taysom Hill can literally line up at fullback, at Y tight end, at the F movement tight end, in the slot, at quarterback, and at running back. I mean, and so you have to make a decision. Hey, man, it's 2nd down and 7. Is Taysom, are we counting this as nickel? Are we counting this as base? How are we doing this as a defense? Because number 7, hey, it's 11 personnel. 11 personnel was 7. Hey, it's 12 personnel was 7. How are we counting that? They make you think and make you play on your heels. And that's one of the advantages that they have against an outstanding defense like Chicago, is that they're going to make you have to communicate. And if you communicate incorrectly, you're beat.
Yep. So who do we like?
I like the Saints. I just think the Saints are a damn good football team.
I do. Barring freakish things from Khalil Mack and everybody else on that defense, I actually like the Saints as well. And that leads us to the nightcap on Sunday, which is Cleveland going to Pittsburgh. 2nd straight week they'll play each other, which is always kind of weird. But everything's weird about this, right? Cleveland's in the playoffs for the first time since 2002, and their coach, Kevin Stefanski, can't be there because of COVID-19, which tells you a couple of things. Number one, you'll miss Stefanski after the first quarter, right? Because their first 15, 20 plays are going to be scripted. So that'll take care. Where it gets dicey for Cleveland from a coaching perspective is after we have to get off the script and adjust to what we've seen in the game. What can we do? And I think people need to understand, like, well, why can't Kevin Stefanski just do this, technologically and be connected that way? Because the NFL rules stipulate you can't. Right. And you can argue whether or not those rules are valid or invalid. But I mean, Ray Farmer, when he was the Browns GM years ago, got fined and suspended for sending text messages down from the box where he was watching down to the sideline. So, Jim Moore Jr. once got penalized for taking a phone call to find out whether or not a tie would get him into the postseason when he was the head coach of the Falcons. So those rules exist. That's why he can't do what we're doing right now would seem to be the most logical thing. It's just not allowed. So we'll find out, I think, a lot about the loss of Stefanski after the first quarter, correct?
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. I should be calling this game because I am the COVID crew. When you think about what has happened.
What a title.
Right. When you think about what's happened to me this season, I called the game in Denver where the Broncos had no quarterbacks. I called the game in Detroit where the Detroit Lions had no coaches. I called the game last week in Carolina where the Saints had no running backs. I mean, wouldn't it just be natural when the head coach is out and people are out with COVID that I should be doing this game? But you're 100% right. The first 15 scripted plays, you're going to stay on script. The only time you get off script on those is like you get into a special situation, a third down and long situation that you didn't script. Then you've got to call a play, right? But here's the thing, talking to a bunch of play callers this season, because this is one of the things, that's been intriguing to me. It really comes down to you're just fishing for information in those first 15. Okay, if we get into this personnel group, how do you match it? If we get into this formation, how do you match it? If we get into, whatever the case, this motion, how do you adjust? How do you adjust if we motion a running back out of the backfield and put him outside at number one receiver? Do you run a linebacker out there, or do you just kick your coverage over? Like, how do you adjust to these things? So now we're fishing for information. Once I gather all this information, now I'm calling plays based off the information I have. And oh, by the way, the great play callers, it's an art form. The great play callers are calling a play, not to set up the second play, but I'll tell you what they're calling. They're calling it to talk about, hey, when we get into this situation in the next drive, this is how we want to attack them. This is the explosive that we want to use. Here's the other thing that happens. The game speeds up on you when you're a first-time play caller. Right. So normally play callers are calling plays and they're thinking about 2 or 3 scenarios, 2 or 3 plays later, and then what they want to attack, on the next third down and 4 or whatever, right? So they're thinking 2 or 3 plays ahead, and they're also thinking a drive ahead. Where am I going to get an explosive? How can I create, 1 or 2 explosives a quarter? And first-time play callers, you know what they're doing? They're calling the next play. They're like, what's the next play? What's the next play? And it really is a hard thing. I think this is going to be a huge challenge for the Cleveland Browns to overcome. I just think it's a huge disadvantage. And we asked in Detroit because Darrell Bevell was the interim head coach, but also the play caller, and he was out with COVID. And I was like, why can't you just go up in a box where nobody is, like the owner's box, and wire up like they are and the coaches and call the plays? Because it's not allowed.
Correct.
It's not allowed. And so the rule may be stupid, but it's the rule, and it's what everybody adheres to. And so, yeah, this is a huge disadvantage for the Cleveland Browns.
Okay. And I said I'd bring this up again because when I talked about the Ravens being dead last in passing yards per game or passing yards, which is the official stat, and, we have these advanced metrics and all that kind of stuff, but when the NFL ranks them, that's what it is. The Steelers were dead last in running, dead last in rushing the football this year. We did some research. We can't say definitively this is the first time we've seen an offense that was dead last in the run and dead last in the pass make the playoffs, but it hadn't happened over the last 20 years. That's as far back as we went. So the idea that you don't need to run the ball or throw the ball well and still make the postseason, I think is kind of interesting. And I don't know what to expect from Pittsburgh, right? Against a weak schedule, they played really well. They played some tougher teams, and guess what? They went from 11-0 to 12-4. And that's the situation they find themselves in, and that's why they're the 3 seed in the playoffs. Ben didn't play last week, which was probably the best thing for him as an older quarterback still recovering from that elbow injury. What are you realistically expecting from the Steelers offense?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, you're just not going to flip the script and all of a sudden say, hey, we're going to be a big time running game. Yeah. Like, running the football is a skill like anything else is a skill. And you and I talk about it all the time. Moving a man from point A to point B against his will is one of the greatest skills in football. And you don't just not do it all season long and all of a sudden say, hey, now we're in the playoffs. Here we go. It doesn't work that way. So when I broke down the Steelers and earlier in the season, I was supposed to do a Steelers game and I got transferred to a different game. But the bottom line was I had done a bunch of film study on them. And I was shocked at how many times they're in 4 wide receivers, how many times they're in 5 cinco, how many times, like their whole thing is, hey, let's just throw it, underneath, and let's let our receivers do the work for us. And, it's the old adage, Trey, which is bullshit, as you know, is, the short passing game is just an extension of the run. No, it's not. It
what a load of crap.
Out. Right. It doesn't wear anybody out. It doesn't physically challenge people. So, like, Buffalo did something to them in that game they played against Buffalo. They just got into press man and they disrupted routes. And because the Steelers can't run the ball, they just said, you're not going to run it. We're not going to honor play action. We're going to get depth. We're going to beat people up in line of scrimmage and we're going to disrupt the route. So there's 2 ways to affect the quarterback. You can either rush him, right? or you can delay the route and the route combination so he has to hold the ball so that late blitzes and late rushes can get there. And that's what the Buffalo Bills did to Pittsburgh. And they were atrocious in that game offensively. They finally, got a courtesy touchdown late, but they were atrocious offensively in that game. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to read the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm a little concerned when Juju Smith-Schuster comes out and says, hey, the Browns are the Browns. Like, it's not the Browns are not the Browns. The Browns are a damn good football team.
Well, I think, like, just so people understand that quote you're talking about, he said they're just gray faceless. That's a Mike Tomlin thing. He's like, we're not worried about them. We're worried about us. I mean, that's one of those things. If you read it, it sounds worse than I think it actually is. I think he was just saying, hey, we're worried about us. They're them. You know what I mean? I think he was doing Mike Tomlin without doing Mike Tomlin, for lack of a better term.
And how that gets translated in the opponent's locker room
Doesn't matter.
The Browns is just the Browns, and it's bulletin board material, and it pisses you off. And I will tell you this. We as football players are simple creatures, right? Just feed us well and say something that can be taken out of context, and it will be.
So who do you like in this game?
Dude,
this one's interesting.
Yeah, I am taking the Steelers with trepidation. I think the play calling thing is going to be hard to overcome. And Pittsburgh still has that ability to rush the passer. They still have that defense. Like I said, I have a lot of trepidation because I don't trust the Steelers offense, but I'm going to take the Steelers and we shall see. I wouldn't be surprised the Browns win it.
Look, I was really surprised with how much Cleveland struggled last week when they were a win and get in scenario, and they had some other opportunities to get in, but against a Mason Rudolph-led Pittsburgh Steelers team, and it was a 2-point game. I mean, that gives me a lot of pause because I thought they were going to handle their business because Pittsburgh was just like, let's get through this and get to the postseason, and the Browns really struggled in that game. There's a big part of me that really wants to take Cleveland because of the things we've talked about with Pittsburgh. But watching what they did last week gives me just as much pause about Cleveland as it does about Pittsburgh. So with that in mind, I think I have to lean toward the Steelers, but I don't feel great about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like when you shouldn't eat that third donut and you do it anyway. You don't feel great about it, but you really wanted it. So I don't know, man. This one is just, I don't have a good feeling one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't either. Like I said, I'm taking the Steelers. I don't feel great about it. With that said, we'll probably go 3-3 over Super Wild Card Weekend. So, but that's the way that's the way these things look. That's what makes it so exciting, though, right? It's always kind of that way.
Well, that's the beauty of the NFL. We'll close it with this. The NFL does this better than any other sports league, in my opinion. They sell the quick turnaround. We have 7 teams this postseason that weren't in last year. 7. And that's going back to the current playoff format, which starts in 1990. That's 31 seasons. Every year we've had at least 4 teams make the playoffs that didn't make the playoffs the previous year. So the 1-year turnaround, that doesn't mean long-term success, but the 1-year turnaround for a fan base, it exists in the NFL, and that's what they do better than anybody else. All right, so that'll do it for this Super Wildcard Edition preview. Hey, on Monday, we'll be back with a Super Wildcard recap of what happened. And we'll see if we were even close to being 3-3 or probably much worse.
We will apologize for all the mistakes we made along the way.
It's important to be open and honest about this, and that's what we're doing in this forum. Enjoy the games, everybody. Stinky, I'll talk to you on Monday.
All right, buddy.